Hi everybody, I just wanted to come on real quick to do a video about this week's assignment, which you're looking at Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. So it's kind of something different to look at because this talks about how our development changes with us over time, which is really what I want you to look at. So the first aspect that you really have to look at and research and make sure that you show that you understand is the various systems within Bronfenbrenner's theory. So we have that microsystem, the mesosystem, the exosystem, the macrosystem, and it is important to talk about the chronosystem because I think one aspect that we've realized from development is that it isn't stagnant. Even Freud and even Erickson, even though we may get quote unquote stuck in a stage that we can always revert back to, we do continue through development over time. So, conditions, history, various things happen to us throughout time to go over that and how does that impact on our development. So one of the things I hear people say is, as a child, I never had a microsystem because of the family dynamics. That is one aspect of your microsystem. As you can see here, there are many different aspects of a child's microsystem. Um, that really is the first and foremost, yes, family. But if there wasn't good role models in your house, if there was animosity or you were adopted or trauma, what you still had a microsystem, and who fulfilled that role for you? For a lot of times and a lot of kids, it might be a teacher, it might be a friend or a friend's parents, it might be another relative. So you're really looking at your microsystem, and you can also talk about the impact that those adverse interactions had. But how did it help you develop into who you became today? Another level that we look at is social welfare services, the mass media, friends of families, those different um, um, agencies and systems that are in place for us. How does attitudes of the culture and what's going on in our culture today different from when we were even kids? So none of these are standalone systems. As you can see, kind of everything goes around, but everything interacts with each other. So when you do this assignment, it will be important for you to discuss and talk about how these systems interact with each other and created who are today, and what this system looks like for you today. How has it changed? You know, family may be still important to you. However, you may now be the mom or the dad, or you may be leaving your family because you're an adult, getting your own place. So, how has your microsystem changed now? So, one of the concerns I hear from people like, is this ever used? How does this work in real life? So I do have some examples that I want to go through and show you. This is just a different way to look at Bronfenbrenner's theory and the different the different systems. This is kind of where we have a child, daycare, school, the neighborhood, extended families. There might be a blended family. One thing we have to take into consideration now is mass media. That is huge, what's going on in our society today. The workplace. How does a workplace impact a child? If you don't have a family friendly workplace, you may be working long hours. You may not be able to take care of your child. Uh, or you may be working in a workplace that is very family friendly. Maybe it has a daycare right there on the grounds that you can go and see your child at lunchtime. So these are different areas that we look at that have an impact on the child. The school board, yes, does have an impact on the child. I think we've heard in the news, one of the school districts is millions of dollars in debt, and how is that going to play on the development of a child? This looks at more, and I'm sorry for the blurriness, but this is something that I did for a school age child. So this is, let's see here if I can back this out so it's not so blurry. But this is a 10-year-old child. So when we look at his self, he's outgoing, he's loud, he, let's see here, what else do I have here? He hangs out with his grandparents, and then his microsystem football was a big thing for this, for Elias, and I've changed the name, of course. Family, school, church. When we get to that next level, siblings are out there, football friends, and coach. All those people play a role in who has helped him develop, who has created who he is, who has a part of his life. Um, you know, Childcare, school and holiday activities, media, cousins also plays a role in the family. We get to the next level. What are those values? The economy. When these children are low or high socioeconomic statuses, what goes on? School structure, national customs, those will all play a role. And when we look at the chrono system over time, we look at development over time. But what's going to happen if, say, there's a new birth in the family or there's even a death in the family? How does that impact everything across the different span and across the different systems? This is one that I found interesting, was for a student. When we look at what's going on, you are a student. How does Bronfenbrenner's theory look different when you're there? Again, one of the first people in this microsystem now is not the family. As you can see, we talked about earlier. It's more your peers, the courses, advisors, your teachers, what's going on there. And as we broaden out, we look at human resources, those committees, councils, different activities that you're involved with. Um, and then, as we even go out, we look at this from more of an educational point of view, how these are all going to be impacting you as a student. So this is one way to look at this. And this is one from a social work perspective. And sometimes, um, for those of you who are becoming nurses or educators, this a lot of time is already done. Um, and you may not even realize that you're using Bronfenbrenner's theory in order to do this. But when we look at what people's strengths and weaknesses are, what they have going for them, what they don't have going for them, what are those challenges that they're going to face. So sometimes we play it out like this. So we kind of start on that macro system. What's the education look like? Their occupational status. For this individual, it looked like there was a downward mobility. Race, ethnicity, non-Caucasian, that is going to play a role in our development. Um, Spirituality also plays a role in development. This person happened to be religious. The exosystem, lack of housing, rural, urban, is the neighborhoods. So what kind of social networks was available to this individual? They have a social position. They do have ties with friends and neighbors. So those are things that we can use to help support this individual. We've got a religious aspect, so they're probably close to their church or other house of worship. They do have ties with their neighbors. So again, these are things that we can use to help support them. Um, here we talk about the microsystem, and as I mentioned, for a lot of you that may have animosity in your own homes, this is one of those areas. So there's attachment issues, there's violence and turmoil, something that even I, working in a school, I hear of very, very often. So sometimes working with students is, who are your supports outside of this microsystem? Who else do you have? Friends, neighbors, spiritual leaders? What other connections do you have? Work a lot of times have a lot of demands on us, and a lot of for this individual, their peer groups were often homeless as well. Is working with your peer groups, if they're homeless, is that going to help you move up? And then that individual piece, we want to look at, there are sometimes genetic factors that do play a role in our development and in our personality. And those are important to look at as well. And again, does this make this individual now Yes, but it doesn't have to. Can this change over time by understanding what those systems and the supports that they have in place? This is how really Bronfenbrenner's theory works. Here is another area just to look at. This is looking at it from a special needs point of view. When children are born, a lot of times, if anybody has worked with early intervention, this is something that's done. There's genetic testing that's done. What are those characteristics? What's the development going to look like? And then, what's that going to look like for the family too? Because anybody who has a child that does have special needs, it's a huge stress on the family that parents have to kind of change what's going on in their own development at that time. And then it looks at the community involvement, healthcare systems, performance in the schools, things that parents have to take into consideration, and then different level determinants, inequities between economic groups. There's plenty of studies that talk about children who do have are predisposed to various conditions and or special needs. There is a socioeconomic difference between how successful these children can be. And there are studies too that show students of low socioeconomic groups are more likely to be identified in school as having special education needs. So, those are things that part of the development that needs people need to be aware of. And then the last one, this is anti-ATOD, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. So this is done by a center. I want to say out of Kentucky, but I don't remember, so my apology. But one thing that they look at when we're looking at children, are they at risk for drug and alcohol use? We look at that individual. What are their attitudes about it? Who are they hanging out with? What kind of behaviors are they engaging with? We look at the family piece, like how does the family feel about drugs and alcohol? How do they feel about the behaviors students are engaging in? What kind of parenting, authoritarian, and permissive parenting is going on. This also plays a role in drug and alcohol use when we think about those studies. What the school looks like, do we have students who are truant, who are absent a lot, who do have school behavior issues? Those students are more at risk, at a higher risk of developing drug and alcohol issues than say the children who are not. Do they follow the rules? Do they have high but reasonable expectations of themselves? And then what is going on in the community? Does the community support anti-drug and alcohol use? Or is it disorganized and yeah, it's okay, but yeah, this is going on over here. So those community norms. So this is when we look at students who, and we can sometimes tell this at a very young age, unfortunately, but we look at this and how do we put supports in place at this time. um, so unfortunately, we have a huge drug epidemic in society and in our state. So I know in working with children and sometimes their parents, when they're in recovery, we work with them and say, okay, this is where it's at. They don't want their own child to make the same mistakes they did. So we look at kind of where things are, what's in place, and then we fill in the blanks at that point. Do they need counseling? Do the parents need help finding different types of housing? What kind of supports are in place for the parents? Are they in counseling to kind of help with their sobriety? Because there's a lot of resources out there, and how do we help make those connections? So this is, a really good model. Not a lot of people look at it and realize how it works. But I think hopefully as you go through this assignment, looking at your own development, you'll see that how it has been used in different instances, maybe not as clear and as circular as this. But it's definitely something that I think people use in order to provide supports for people and watch them develop over time. So definitely, as with this assignment, as with any, please only share what you're comfortable with sharing. So if you said, my immediate family was not the best support, that is fine. You can leave it at that and move on. You don't have to go into any details about your personal history as to what happened, because this isn't so much, I don't want this to be a therapeutic assignment. I want you to make sure that you understand these various systems and how these systems have helped you and supported you over time and helped you develop into the person that you are today, really looking at that chrono system. So um, you guys are doing great. Keep up the good work. And sorry, I'm getting a little frog in my throat. So I will stop the video here. But keep up the good work and please post any questions that you may have. Have a good night.